So let us discuss on the slides that I shared with you. So I am sharing the slides now. You're able to see slides, I hope, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So, so I will skip the slides which you are clear. Let me. So I will directly come to the application slides because I had that theory slides are well understood by all.
So one doubt I have is how do we check for convergence?
Right. See, usually discriminator, both of the cost functions uh, keep say increasing if we are maximizing, okay, and then after some time they saturate. So roughly say discriminator cost function will is in the range 0 to 1. So the discriminator output is in the range 0 to 1. Okay, so it is roughly when it saturates, people will stop, I think, and probably 0.5 is the uh, value it takes, I think, at convergence. So, to my knowledge, when the like the loss functions start saturating, people stop, or the cost functions start saturating, people stop. But the convergence is considered when the discriminator law, like output of probability of discriminator is around 0.5, I hope. So, those who have simulated can throw any more light. So Gautam, you have simulated GANs before?
No, sir, actually not.
Okay, who has done it? So I will figure out and tell. Some of the students have done, I think Murali has done, and few more students have done, BTech students. So I will figure out with them and tell. So discriminator at the end, it will not be able to decide the difference between real and fake, right? So the discriminator, say probability reaches to 0.5 if I am correct. So that's where the convergence happens. Okay. So let us start discussion from this conditional GAN. So as in conventional GAN framework, we give a noisy vector here. This noisy vector can be purely noise. So for example, it may be Gaussian distributed or uniform distributed noise. In some cases, usually in basic GAN framework, it is purely noise vector. And based on this noise vector, there are some upsampling layers and convolution layers here in generator, and that brings into the image dimensions. Okay, and once this brings into the image dimensions, it is expected that it generates an image. Okay, and this image is compared, or in some sense validated through discriminator, which has the real image with it, and both of them are compared through cross entropy loss to say actually whether they are same or they are how different they are. But the loss is not purely cross entropy, it is with cross entropy and adversarial loss. That means the generator loss depends upon the generated image. So generator network is also there within. Similarly, the update of discriminator affects the generator because the generator itself adjusts to bring the high probability from the discriminator, or in tune with the discriminator at that time. Okay, this is what is the basic GAN framework. Okay, now in conditional GAN, what is the difference? So what is the difference in conditional GAN? In addition to say the giving noise vector, we also give a label. because this will help to generate only the samples of that class. Okay. Similarly, in real image as well, we give the real sample plus the one hot encoding of the label. Okay. So in this way, what we are giving is the like what we are trying to maximize is d of x given y. That is, the conditional probabilities are considered here rather than the direct probabilities. So instead of d of x being higher, that is having high probability, d of x given y, that means given that class, what is the probability that the discriminator learns that it is the true image, and given that class, what is the generator generates that particular sample of that class. Okay. So here the change is from the conventional distribution to conditional distribution. Okay. This is what is the change in the conditional GAN. Because of the advantage is you can generate only samples of, say, character 3, character 5, or any character. Similarly, any particular class samples. Okay.
One doubt.
Yeah.
What is the class label that we are sending to generator? They need not be true class labels of Z, right?
No, it is true class label only. It is, for example, if we are giving, say, we already know that in training, which real sample we will be giving to discriminator is known, right? So that corresponding sample or label only we will give here. So it is true class label. So generator is supposed to generate only that class sample. So from training itself, we will try to make sure it.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So now this is about the InfoGAN. See, in InfoGAN, what is the like improvement or the change from the conditional GAN is, this also has the same capabilities in terms of application, and it has additional capabilities. What this does is, for example, in addition to, say, instead of giving the class label, there are some InfoGAN frameworks where we do give the class label, one hot encoding of the class label in the generator. But here we don't give the class label at the discriminator. So it is not the conditional density that we are maximizing. Okay, but it is like conventional GAN density. So we are trying to find out the estimate the total density of samples, that is P of X of samples, and generate. So the basic like concept of GAN and InfoGAN are same, but the addition to GAN, what we have is a code vector. This code vector is like a say this is one noise vector Z, right? So this noise vector is just to like start changing the distribution of noise to image, but this code vector is representing the class label. That means, for example, if I have 10 classes, so for each class I may decide one distribution. That means distribution with different parameters. So each of them, say, may have mean differently, but variance can be same, or mean and variance both differently. Okay, so like that, I a priori only fix the parameters of the code vector of that class. So what I am trying, and the discriminator, what it tries to do is, it tries to estimate the parameters of the code vector. So if I am confining to third class, for example, I say that third class is n0, 1. Okay. So then I'm giving, say, third class sample as the real sample, and as some noise vector, I'm trying to generate some 3. Now code vector is a sample from n0, 1. A sample from means what? Say it can be 0.1, 0.01, or say 1.2, whatever. So it is that sample generated from n0, 1 is a code vector. And code vector, when I want to give, even single scalar can be given, few set of samples generated from n0, 1 also can be given. That means 3 samples I may give, okay, as a code vector, or 10 samples also I can give. In fact, one of our students is doing tracking using this visual tracking, enhancing or applying this InfoGAN to visual tracking, where she used a complete map generated as a code vector. and that map is generated through some known distribution. See, in tracking what we have positive samples, that is the object to be tracked, and the negative patches are the background patches where there is no object. So for all positive patches, that is the patches around object, she is generating one kind of code vector, that is say probably n0, 1. That means say if she needs a map of say 100 cross 100 samples from n0, 1 can be generated. That gives the code matrix now for the positive samples. Similarly, for negative samples, what I give is another, say u here -1, 1 if I am doing that, or n say 2, 3. That means mean is 2 and variance is 3. With that I generate for negative samples. Now in discriminator, what we have a small network again. That network aim is like a regression network. It will predict what is C and what is say what is mean and what is variance of the code distribution I am sending here. Okay, so it say here what I'm learning is I'm statistically tying one of the distribution to one particular class. That means n0, 1 is tied statistically to class 1, n2, 3 is tied statistically to background class, like that. So foreground class n01 and n23 for the background class. Like that, when I tie, what it learns is it is an additional check. That means, for example, anyway, generator has to generate a sample of that class. That means it has to generate, for example, a foreground class or the actual track, but it may not generate all the time. If it is not generating, then there is a deviation in the like discriminator. When in Q network, when I find the when I estimate finally the parameters, there is a discrepancy in the parameters. With that, I can know whether generator is doing well or not. Okay, so it is an additional check. How is it done? Is in optimization, how is it done is by maximizing the mutual correlation, mutual information between the code vector and the generated sample. This X now from the generator is can be written as G Z, C. Okay, because G Z, C means G is a function or a network which takes two inputs Z and C. With these two inputs, what I have is the output X here. It is not X, but it is G, Z, C. And that has to have very good correlation with respect to the code vector. So that way it is a mutual information. Okay, so mutual information has to be maximized. Since I am minimizing with respect to G here, what I am maximizing, see with negative sign, if I am doing minimization, it is maximization of information. So mutual information. When we expand the mutual information, it comes through entropy. Okay, the terms are like expansion of mutual information is entropy minus this conditional entropy. So with this, if you expand, you will get finally like this. And in cost function, you will get, say, you can replace this P C given X by Q C given X, which is the estimate. So finally, what we are doing is, we are in some sense, we are trying to enforce this cost function to estimate these parameters of the code vector well by the discriminator. So the explicit details probably we can leave for now, but the idea is this.
Sir,
Yeah.
how does the determination of the distribution C, X, how does that help in the generator? Like, how does that help the generator in generating better images?
Yeah. See, what I am doing is, say I have class 3 samples, class 5 samples. Okay. So usually when I'm generating class 3 samples by any usual GAN framework, it is not necessary that only 3 should come, because generator is trained in general with all training samples, right? So 3, 5, 0, 2, each of them are considered as real images at different times. And then generator knows how to generate 3, generator knows to generate any digit from 0 to 9. That's all generator knows. Okay. So now there are some applications where you specifically want to generate only 3. Okay. Here in some applications, you want to strictly generate all rotated samples of a chair, for example, all scaled samples of a chair, for example. So these are now even more important, because this gives a realistic generation, say all different views of a person. Okay, if I want to generate 3D views of a person, it is very difficult. So, but this has that capability. How does it has? Because the code vector essentially is implicitly saying, for example, it's like if you people know how people transmit the messages, say when they want to transmit messages, they embed very secret messages. They embed that secret message within a image, for example. Okay, so it is like steganography or something like that. Okay, so they embed the message bits in the lower significant bits of an image, for example, and send it. So when the image is when someone looks an image, it just looks like an image. But when the transmission happens, if they know that these are the locations where the information is embedded, they can easily decode it and find the information. Similarly, here we are not explicitly saying that generator has to generate only say 3 digits of 3 or digits of 5 or rotated images or scaled images, but we are saying to generator implicitly that this code vector corresponds to generating different rotations. This code vector corresponds to generating different scales. This code vector corresponds to generating trees. So that's what we are. So while training itself, we are enforcing. How are we enforcing is, for that code vector all the time, we only give 3 here. If you want to generate trees, for 3, I take a sample from n0, 1 and give a code vector here, and 3 will be the real image. Since I have tied them implicitly in training, also the discriminator only predicts 0 and 1 in the mean and variances in training. So if that is trained like that, then testing, it knows, the generator alone when is used in testing, it knows that once this code vector is given, this is operation to be done. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
So we'll move on then.
Sir, one doubt, sir.
Yeah, please ask.
Sir, so this code vector, are we learning it, or it is also
not code vector is predefined. So I am just defining myself, user defined. But what is learned is how to predict the distribution of code vector. That is mean and variances. How do we get from the discriminator? So that is through cost function. This mutual information cost, it will enable the discriminator to learn. Say there is, for example, usually discriminator will have a 1-0 prediction, right? So in addition to that, the discriminator features are given to a small feed forward neural network, and through regression, it learns mu and sigma square. Okay, so like that. So they predicts the mean and variances. So we are effectively learning the distribution from samples. Okay, in Infogan, that distribution learning is tied to particular class of samples or particular like transformation of samples. And
sure.
it is, yeah, it is also.
But how is this C related to the different orientations of objects? Like how does the generator know or learn that some C corresponds to some orientation of an object?
Right. So how is it done is, in training itself, we do rotate. Say we say that say if I have a chair, my objective is to like learn different rotated versions of chair. Okay, for a particular code vector, and different scaling of chairs for another particular code vector. That means what I do, initially I say that all n0, 1 will give rotated samples, n2, 3 will give scaled versions. I decide that a priori and train accordingly. That means while training, I give all rotated versions in real images, while the code vector is generated sample from or samples from n0, 1.
Okay, by appropriately choosing the real images along with this code vector, we are able to train the generator as well indirectly.
Correct. So this is more I would say powerful, because any place where we don't explicitly train the things or explicitly say the things are more powerful. So even in say conditional GAN, we are explicitly giving the label one-hot encoding. So here there is a provision. Even some people give, in addition to C code vector, they also give one-hot encoding. But some cases you can give code vector alone. But either case, what we are learning is distribution from, say, from the samples, you are trying to learn the distribution. So it is helps as a double check for the convergence, double check for the validation, all those things. Because if it's able to predict the corresponding distribution parameters, means that the whole process is going correct. And
Yes, sir. Hence.
right. So in fact, we recently have seen in tracking it is working reasonably well. Only thing is she had to Harichandana is doing this work. Still need to experiment on large data and see. But in my view, it has very good power to have good real applications later. It is also shown that actually it helps in the paper, in their original paper. They show that it helps to disentangle the feature learning. That means, say in usual learning, all features, say in neural network. So if we have samples in say XR problem, assume that. So X1, X2, if I plot, then two samples of a particular class cannot be separated linearly from the two particulars of another class in XR problem. But if I just train a network with two neurons in the input layer and two neurons in the hidden layer and one output neuron, hidden layer outputs, if I see y1, y2 and plot them, then I can linearly separate the features in the hidden layer. So it is in some sense disentangling the feature representation. Okay, that means X1, X2 are mixed, that means non-linearly separable, but Y1, Y2 are linearly separable. Okay, so this also is at least claimed, or it argued to say that this disentangle the feature learning. So all say different features of face, for example, if you want to learn, we can learn independently in some sense. So these applications are clear. So if you don't ask anything, I will move on. Okay, these are say the now the other kind of applications. What they are focusing is, see, so far we have good number of deep learning methods and architectures, and they are well evolved. Can I use the already existing evolved methods as generator, and can I fine tune or improve the performance through discriminator? So better discriminator design and having adversarial loss for training on the overall. So in all such applications, the generator is directly the CNN network or the architecture already which is in place. So here is the case, such case. So here is also same. So they come up to proposals. They have several proposals, thousands of proposals here. So if they separate them into, say, objects and background in the proposal states with some probabilities, then they super resolve and they have a database of super resolved proposals, and they compare with them and then try to back propagate both the adversarial loss and as well as the fast RCNN loss to better localize and classify the samples. So this is for small object detection. So this is again perceptual GAN. This is also of similar lines, but rather than in the image space, let us do the fine tuning whole thing in the feature space. So this is visual tracking. So one of the your senior student Suraj and Naveen has done this work. So there are some limitations yet, but the idea is very good. So so conventionally the generator, usually there is they learn features of target. They also learn the features of the search regions, and they do convolution of both of them or correlation of both of them to get the confidence map or the response map. The high in the response map indicates that that is the location of the object. Okay, but this is Siamese network people call, and this may not give very accurate tracking. So in such case, can I use a discriminator here and a ground truth provided to the discriminator and adversarially train, or the adversarial loss can I impose on this to further improve? So they were able to do some with some improvements, but there is a implementation. There are few implementation issues here. So this is cyclic GAN. In this, see, usually people what they want to do is say coloring sketches, for example. What we are doing, if you have a sketch, you have a colored image. So there is a image to, in some sense, image to image translation. That means transformation or translation. So what I want to do is, I want to impose a particular coloring on it. So if I want to do that, what usually I do, say the sketch and the colored image, I pair them at the beginning itself. That means for this sketch, this is the color image. For this sketch, this is the color image. So I have a thousands of images of sketches. I have thousands of images of color images, but both of them are paired. That means all these 1,000, each for each of these 1,000, there is a one-to-one mapping here. But see, without, through this one-to-one mapping, learning is done in some of the networks. But the impression is that if I learn through one-to-one mapping, through one-to-one mapping or pairing in the dataset itself, it may not be very generic learning. And then there are slightly better methods, or the challenging problems evolved, where if you want to say learn one completely from one set of images to another set of images, okay, is it feasible or not? Okay, so the experimentation that is done in this cyclic GAN is to transform the images of horse to zebras and zebras to horse. Okay, so they have two data sets, a set of horse images, set of zebra images. But the idea here is we don't want to pair them at the beginning. That means this horse image, first horse image is paired to first zebra image and so on. So what people have done or try to do is, so to pair or transform from horse to zebra, let there be one generated discriminator pair, and to transform from one horse to another zebra, say horse to zebra, one generated discriminator pair, zebra to horse, another discriminator and generator pair. But let us use them all in like one cycle. So how do people do? So say if they start from a input zebra image, so this is the real image now. So they started from zebra image. So and then this generator is learned to generate horses, assume that. And you also have a horse image in your database. And then you find actually some, while training, this initially this comes a random noise. So you have a horse image, random horse image taken from database. And that backpropagation happen with that. Okay. So and this discriminator has a loss, and that discriminator loss will help us to adjust this generator. Okay, generator as well as this discriminator. And then this horse, assume that it is just fine-tuned a little. And from this horse to, I just want to get the zebra again. And this zebra may not be very accurate. And hence again, I will do with this discriminator and this generator, I will again apply adversarial loss to adjust the parameters. And then it generates slightly better zebras. Okay, so and this happens. So this is depicted, the process is this. This is depicted in two different pictures. So that in one case, the focus of fine tuning the horse is shown here, and another case focus of say how the back propagation in zebra happens is shown here. So this is what is cyclic GAN. So I suggest you people to go through the paper to know more details, especially the cost function and all. So there will be, say, I think cost function now involves 3 terms. I hope you just see once. So I have seen little back, so I did not remember, but I think it has the cost function, this generator, adjustment, discriminator, and then this generator, adjustment and discriminator. Probably 4 terms altogether may be there. So 2 discriminator fine tuning and 2 generators fine, like learning.
So,
right, ask.
Sir, this generator B2A and generator A to B, are both of them trained simultaneously?
Yeah, I think actually I need to check once, but they are done simultaneously, one after the other, in sense at least. So if not in single update, this will be done. Say for example, it is like we are now having 2 passes for discriminator optimization 1, and once followed by generator optimization in a conventional GAN, right? So now it will go in 4 passes.
Still, sir, I think one generator discriminator pair needs to be trained in order to generate at least one image perfectly, right? Then based on that, we can train the other generator B2A and then discriminator B correspondingly. Otherwise, it will give only noisy images all the time.
Okay. Fine. I understand what you are trying to say is first, say if the one is very, see, it depends upon what we give as the input. So if we are completely giving this itself directly as input here, then it may again generate noise. That's what you are saying, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so probably I think at the beginning both may be fine-tuned, like both may be trained independently. After that, this cyclic training may happen. Yeah, I think
Yes, sir, that's possible.
right. So initially they will get trained usually in most of the framework, even in say fast RCNN. So how we do, for example, if first we train the proposals and then we train the fast RCNN block, and then we fine tune both of them, right? So same thing happens here also, right? So, so that anything else on this or on the these video lectures? So now I will stop sharing now. So let us so what I suggest is then I suggest you people to go through the other video lectures and then we will discuss. So shall we discuss briefly on say support vector machines? Okay, so I will give the basic idea of support vector machine now. So I will share the screen and give very basic idea of support vector machine. So we will discuss a few other aspects probably later. So you're able to see the notes, I hope, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So far in say classification, what we have done in linear perceptron, let us go back to linear perceptron classification. So if we have some samples, okay, so if we have some samples of class 1 and if we have some samples of class 2, okay, so in linear perceptron, what is the idea of linear perceptron? Anybody remember? X1, X2, these are features and these are all samples. So how do we start discussion about linear perceptron? Say we want to find a y which is equal to say f of x comma w, okay, and this w may be W transpose x in some sense. So that means this is f of W transpose x y, and W transpose x greater than 0, it belongs to omega 1 class, and W transpose x less than 0 belongs to omega 2 class, right? Correct? So, and then you may start from arbitrary decision. Okay, so you may start from arbitrary, say arbitrary W. Okay, and then this W and this W gets adjusted based on the update we give, that is gradient descent. You people remember or not?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, minus eta times. So what was the gradient descent update? Can one of you tell? So there is something here, right? What was that?
Misclassification.
Yeah, misclassified samples, misclassified x and delta x into x. Okay, so this delta x is -1 and 1 for class 1, class 2, right? So and then finally you will arrive at some decision boundary and say that this is the decision boundary by linear perceptron, right? So this was the discussion we had on the linear perceptron. Now the question is this a very good decision boundary? Okay, that means, see, for example, if I start initializing each time, where do we start? We initialize W. W is initialized randomly. Okay, in it. So randomly initialize, and I will start to apply gradient descent. I will convert somewhere. So I may convert sometimes to this decision boundary. Sometime I may get, say, for example, maybe another decision boundary. I may get, say, this decision boundary also separates the class 1 and class 2 samples. And this decision boundary also separates class 1 and class 2 samples. Okay. So there are several, or in fact, how many choices for the decision boundary I may get at the end of linear perceptron? How many I may get? Can some of you tell how many decision boundaries I may get?
There are infinite possibilities.
Yeah, there are infinite possibilities. Okay. So and then in fact I can get also like this. Okay. So then the one decision boundary can be like this. So infinite possibilities are there. So among these, all these infinite possibilities, the question is, which is a best decision boundary? Okay, so for example, if I rub all these things now, okay, because we have provision now, okay, so if I erase these things, which is a very good decision boundary that you think? So among all these possibilities, can you guess which do you think is a, so if you want to separate class 1 and class 2 samples, which decision boundary you suggest is the best? So for example, this assume that I will give two decision boundaries now. Okay, one is like this and other is like this. Among, say, this one decision boundary 1 and decision boundary 2. Okay, 1 and 2. Which do you think is better decision boundary?
The blue one.
Huh?
Second one.
Yeah, second one is better decision boundary. Why do we say second one is better decision boundary?
Because its distance from both the means is maximum.
Okay. Is it because the distance from the means or something also else? See, for example, distance from the means is to be maintained. I will come up with slightly different samples.
So the perpendicular distance is maximum, sir.
What is that?
Perpendicular distance from the decision boundary to each point.
Each point
to the boundary, decision boundary, that perpendicular distance is.
So this mean is, assume that this is the mean here, and the mean here is, say, I will just sketch the means. Okay, mean here is this and mean here is this. So mean between means, if I see, for example, okay, this also probably is good. Okay, but is this better, or say, for example, in this case, okay, is this better? Okay, here it is 1 again. Okay, this is 1 and this is 2. Among these 1 and 2, which is better again? So you're able to see the notes or not now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So between, say, these two are the means, and as I said, this is one possible decision boundary, and the other possible decision boundary is, say, for example, this is another possible decision boundary. Okay, among these two, 1 and 2 again, which is better? Both are roughly, say, with means equidistant or far.
The second one.
The second one is better. So in why we are saying that the second one is better in each of these cases? So on any other idea?
It can generalize well for new test sample.
Yeah, very good. It can generalize well for new test sample. Why do you think so? Because see, if I assume that while updating, if there is a sample which is falling here, okay, so there is a sample here, okay, or even if there is a sample here, to which class should I put to? Say there is a sample here, so it has a very good, say for example, first one has a very good confusion in terms of it will put close to that, okay, close to even this, both samples are very close, but it puts this in the other class, okay. but compared to its samples, this sample is far away. Similarly is the case here. So instead of putting it to class 2, it will put into class 1, which is not very fair. Okay, so it's in some sense generalizes well to test samples. That is one point. There is another second point. While getting at the decision boundary, while training, say for example, if the decision boundary comes slightly say wrong, if it slightly goes like this, so it will immediately misclassify the samples. That means if the samples are close to any of the sample from class 1 and class 2 are close to decision boundary, it means that it has the it is prone to misclassify them if because of numerical optimization problems. Is it not? So these are the two problems, and for that reason the decision boundary which is more distinct. So now I want to characterize this decision boundary in a more like better sense. How do I characterize? So I want to come up with a general saying that if this is the like property for the decision boundary I considered in the previous two cases. Say this was the previous one, and okay, yeah. So I would like to now come up with a better argument for saying that this is the better decision boundary. Can you tell some argument which is a better decision boundary? Yeah. So I want to define now that this is a better decision boundary. So how do I define? Which is distant from
the points, the data points.
From the all samples of class 1 and all samples of class 2. Okay, fine or not? The decision boundary that is in some sense distant from all points of class 1 and all points of class 2. But when I say plot the samples, what may happen? All points, will they really play a role in deciding this decision boundary? So if I want to come up with one which is distant from all, which sample should I look at?
The nearest sample.
Yeah, the nearest samples I have to look at. So if I look at the nearest samples, for example, this is one nearest sample and this is another nearest sample. Okay, assume that if I look at. Now, if this also probably I can consider as another nearest sample and so on. Okay, if I consider these nearest samples, okay, these samples are known as support vectors. Okay, I will tell why the name support vector has come later. But these samples, nearest samples, will decide now which is a better decision boundary. Thus, these are in some sense referred to as support vectors. Okay. Now, given that these are support vectors, okay. So now, now how should I define my decision boundary? This decision boundary should be say far like distance enough from class 1 support vectors or class 1 closest samples and class 2 closest samples. Fine. But what is that optimal point up to where I can go distant from class 1 samples, and what is the optimal point up to where I can go distant from class 2 samples? You understand my question? So I may say that, so I can go up to say for example, this if I want to be distant from here, I can even go here, right? So this is also a possibility. So I can also go up to here, is it not? If I want to distant from here. Similarly, if I want to distant from here, I can go even up to here, is it not? So why I have stopped only in between somewhere?
It should lie between the support vectors of both the classes.
So if I go too distant, it becomes close to another class. It should not happen. Okay. So the optimal point that is equally distant from both the closest samples of the support vectors is a best decision boundary. Okay. So if I just find out the support vectors, then the distance, if I see from here to here and this to this. Okay. If I say that this is D1 and this is D2, for example, any closest sample from class 1 and class 2, then the line or the decision boundary, that is W transpose X plus B, okay, that is having equidistance, okay, from both closest samples is the best decision boundary. Fine. That is being considered, or that is usually given by support vector machine.
That's why
Yeah.
So why are we considering only points near the decision boundary? Like, won't the points away from decision boundary also play a role?
Right. So why do you think the points away from decision boundary play a role?
So for example, class 1 has only 2 points and class 2 has 10 points, for example. Though it is far, then decision boundary will vary, right?
Right. So what you are saying is, for example, if there are say class 1 all has 10 points and 1 point is that is here, okay, and class 2 has only 2 points or whatever, and then if I decide like this, then it may not be very general decision boundary. That's your argument, and better rather I may decide something like this which is more general. That's your argument.
Yes, sir.
Right, good. So that is correct. So what you are saying is it not necessarily have only 2 samples, it may have more samples as well. So samples mostly are here, okay, assume that. But actually based on say there are one spurious sample which is say for example which is somewhere here, okay, or even here, okay, one spurious sample of class 1 may be here, okay. So in this case I will completely get confused, so I will take a sample something like this, okay. So let me take a sample which is to depict your case in more rigor. I am bringing like this, okay. So now in this case what if we go by our argument, we take the closest samples in some sense. If we are able to find out separating region and then find the closest sample, these are the closest samples, but this is not general, and whereas this probably may be or this probably may be more general. Correct? This what is your argument, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, correct. So this is true in general, and these are known as noisy samples, or say for example these are noisy samples. So support vector machine has whatever I am discussing now is the crude form or very basic form of support vector machine, where it deals only with the closest samples, assuming that there are no noisy samples in the database. That means when I'm acquiring the features, all the features are very well acquired and there are no noisy samples. But even if there are noisy samples, how to take them or how to have a decision boundary even in non-separable cases. This is in some sense close to non-separable case, because what may happen, say for example, if the samples are like this, okay, okay, one sample, assume that is one sample is like this. So it is a non-separable case. That means I can't completely separate them by a linear line. So these are non-separable samples. In such case, if I just go by my previous argument, I will not be able to make even a decision boundary, proper decision boundary. So in such case, what support vector machine does is, you take the decision boundary which is general, and but give a penalty. Say now if I consider this decision boundary, for this which are the support vectors now are the closest samples from either class, these two becomes the support vectors, and I am ignoring this, so I will account to it later. So these two are the support vectors, and I am finding a decision boundary which is like equidistant. Now there was a sample, I think somebody has taken it out. So this sample now is misclassified, and hence this is lying in the other side of margin, and hence the other side of the decision boundary, and hence a penalty corresponding to this distance should be included in the cost function. Okay. So that is the case where support vector machine can deal with this noisy samples or the samples which are not linearly separable. That means the case where the samples are not linearly separable. And so it has a provision to incorporate them. So it depends upon how we make the cost function. Okay. So now yeah. Any other doubts just relating to that?
Sir, this seems more like PCA and what we did in FLD.
Right. So it is not in that terms, because what we are looking is not the dimension of maximum scatters. We are now what we are doing is I will give a small brief. Say if I can give some idea on cost function also, I will try to give now. Okay, so that actually you will appreciate what is this. So it is not exactly like PCA and FLD, but it has a flavor of deciding cost function, taking the class 1, class 2 samples into account. So it has a cost function framed from class 1, class 2 labels as well, like in FLD, and it finds a direction. It's not maximum scatter direction, but the direction of the linearly separating line based on the support vectors. So that you can probably attribute somewhat similar to PCA, but it's not. It's like very high level way you can see some relations, but it's not directly related.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So now,
Sir,
yeah, please ask.
sir, actually, while deciding decision boundary only, we'll include the condition that it should be
Right.
far from the nearest points. But how will we know that for a particular decision boundary, these points will be near? Only after knowing the decision boundary, we can find that points which are near to that boundary. Right?
Correct. Agreed. So we don't know. So that's why what we do is we start with say all samples. The cost function in support vector machine is not very simple. It is reasonably complex. I will just probably, since anyway I started discussion on it, so I will discuss with some details. So assume that if I have any decision boundary, okay, and if I have some point, so some point, the distance say from the decision boundary to the point, okay, I will probably put slightly differently. So assume that some if I have some point somewhere and if I have some decision line, so what I say is the perpendicular distance. See, all this has to do with the perpendicular distance of a point to the line, okay, because I'm saying that that is what is equal from the nearest neighbors. Okay, so assume that I have point xk with me, and this line is W transpose x plus b, okay, is equal to 0. So I don't know initially what is W, say general any line, okay, this is not pertaining only to support vector machine. I have some point in 2 dimensions or multi dimensions, okay, where the point is xk and the line is W transpose x plus b equal to 0. In that case, how do I quantify the distance? That is my question. Okay, so assume that I will give an expression. I will probably see if I can derive. So the distance is given by y of xk by norm W. Okay, this is the perpendicular distance. This is W transpose xk plus b by norm W. Sorry. Okay, this is the perpendicular distance of a point xk to the line W transpose x plus b equal to 0. Okay, this is in general for any line. Fine. So how do I derive, if you ask? Probably what we do is, say for example, this point, if I see this point, particular point, okay, this point be x perp. Okay, so this x perp lies on the line. Okay, so now what I do is say so I will see this is xk, okay, the line xk, and this is x perp. Okay, so I will write now xk is equal to, say, xk. I will just use a little bit of trigonometry to do that. Okay, xk plus xd. Okay, d is in fact, say it's like it's not exactly d. So xk x perp minus xk minus xk. Okay, so this xk is the vector that I am considering. The norm of that is, let it be y. Sorry. Okay, so let this be delta x for time being. what I will do is I will try to substitute this in the expression which I know for the line. W transpose X plus B is equal to 0 for the points on the line. So I will just multiply both sides with W transpose, and then I will also add B. So W transpose X per minus XK plus B is equal to W transpose delta X plus B, and this gives, okay, W transpose X per plus B plus W transpose XK plus B if I add.
Sir, it's minus W transpose XK, no, sir.
Ah, right, correct. Oh, fine. Sorry, correct. No need to add to it. Right. So, SB minus W transpose XK is equal to W transpose delta X plus B here. Okay, so this is now, this is 0 because this is on the line, and now what I have is W transpose delta X is equal to, okay, plus W transpose XK plus B is equal to 0. Okay, so what I wish to get is the perpendicular distance, right? So this distance I want to get. So say let me see if okay. I think I missed something somewhere, but the distance, perpendicular distance from any point to the line is given by this. So I will see the derivation. Probably I will record and send or show you the derivation later. So for time being, you take granted that the perpendicular distance from any point to the line is given by W transpose XK, that point, plus B by norm W. Okay, so given, if we take this, what support vector machine tries to does is, it tries to find say among all possible points, the points, say for you start from random, assume that if I start from random W, it tries to formulate its cost function such that the distance from all the points, say for example, it finds the distance from all the points, but the cost function takes only samples which are closest. That means, say the samples having minimum distance, that is minimum W transpose XK plus B by norm W, okay, minimum over XK. Okay, this is to be maximized over W comma B. This is the cost function support vector machine considers. Okay, so what it is doing, so this, if you understand what it is doing is, so the perpendicular distance from a point to the line is given by this W transpose X plus B by norm W, And sometimes, see this W transpose X plus B by norm W, sometimes it is positive, sometimes it is negative. So because what will happen is if the sample is this side, okay, and then say if this is the correct decision boundary, for all class 1 samples W transpose X plus B is greater than 0. For all class 2 samples W transpose X plus B is less than 0, right? So this W transpose X plus B by norm W is not a unsigned distance, it is a signed distance. Okay, so sometimes it is positive, sometimes it is negative. So what we need to do, make it unsigned distance is, so distance, this is signed, okay, and then unsigned distance D is equal to like exactly we have done in the case of linear perceptron. We also add an auxiliary term here for say class 1 samples W transpose XK plus B is greater than 0. So no need to make any delta X, or no need to add like multiply with any constant sign constant here. But for class 2 samples, for X belongs to omega 1. But whereas class 2 samples, W transpose X plus B is less than 0 for X belongs to omega 2. Okay, and hence the distance, signed distance or unsigned distance, is the class label of that sample into W transpose XK plus B by norm W. Okay, so this is the unsigned distance. So is this point clear? If it is negative class, that is for omega 2 class, what I say is yk is equal to -1, assume that. And for omega 1 class, yk is +1. Okay, so if I define the labels as +1 and -1 initially, okay, the unsigned distance or the distance without like numerical value of the distance, what I get, the distance I get is yk into W transpose XK plus B by norm W. Is this clear? Is this fine?
Finally, we'll see that D is unsigned.
Finally, we see that D is unsigned by making the use of class label. Because we know that class label is say for omega 1 class, we say if it is 1 and W transpose X plus B has to be 0, is greater than 0 for if it is omega class, omega 1 class. Given W and B, if they are proper, then for all omega 1 class samples, the distance will be positive if I consider yk into W transpose XK plus B. And similarly, if I take for omega 2 class samples, if yk is negative, then it all becomes positive if distance is calculated as yk into W transpose XK plus B by norm W.
Yes,
Fine?
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
Yeah. So now given this, oh, fine, very good. So here actually, so is there a between
W found
here expert?
How is W found here?
How will W is found is after the whole optimization here. Okay, so here what we are trying to do is only to form the cost function. Okay, so the cost function is like this now. So now to make the proper cost function with without having sign issues, what we do is this is the cost function. Okay, so here cost function, as you see, this gives the perpendicular distance of xk from the W transpose X plus B at that instant of W and B. Okay, it may not be accurate. So initially when I start, the W and B may not be correct, and even the nearest samples also will not be correct. So for example, if I start from here, okay, my W may be some, say for example, my W may be here. Okay, so nearest sample for this is probably say this may be nearest sample and this may be nearest sample. These may not be correct nearest samples when we get a correct class, like correct W and B. Okay, So at the beginning, so it's an iterative approach in optimization. So where there are two objectives here. One objective is to find out the minimum distance and maximize that minimum distance with respect to W and B. Maximize with respect to what? Only the samples which are minimum distance. Okay. So at this instant, what we are doing is this. But if I take this as the correct, this is the W at that instant, what is happening? The minimum distance samples are this and this. Okay, with respect to that you are doing, but this is misclassified. So this this will not be positive for that. Okay, then it further gets updated such that all the samples of class 1 and class 2 are correctly classified. Till then the update will happen for this optimization. And the convergence of this optimization ensures that finally all class 1 samples are one side, all class 2 samples of other side for a linearly separable samples, and then the margin, the W and B are such that they are equidistant from both classes. Okay, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, in case, say, for example, if we have intermediately, say this is the decision boundary. In such case, what will happen? These two are equidistant, okay, but the distance between them we are trying to maximize. See, please note that to make the decision boundary, say this is one possibility and this is another possibility, 1 and 2. To find out a best decision boundary, what we are doing is we are maximizing the distance. We are now, unless in the previous discussions, we are not minimizing here. We are maximizing the distance between what and what? The nearest samples. See, now if I want to, this is the, for this one, these are the distances which are small, but for 2, I have the better provision. Okay, with respect to different nearest neighbors, fine. So the maximization still goes on and I will reach 2 at the convergence. That means even the, once the samples are classified, the update of the W and B doesn't stop. It goes till I get the best maximization. That means if I come to 2, there is no possibility that I can get even better distance with respect to the closest samples. Then it stops. Fine? Yeah, fine. So only thing that is not very come out in our discussion is, say, just the margin. This is actually this is a so this is origin, right? So what we do, x bar x perp is a point here. So x perp is a total point, and this is xk. Xk is a point. So x perp. So is this delta x necessary? So what I want to find is the distance, right? So let me check probably once. So meanwhile, please ask if you have any other questions or doubts. I will probably clarify now itself. I think it is reasonably trivial. I somehow missed it. So in fact, when I sent the notes on neural networks, so at that time, along with the neural networks notes, you also have the discussion on the support vector machine. So I don't know whether you people have seen it or not. Now, probably what I suggest is you can see up to the discussion that we are having now. So it's good. So now I could get the thing. See, what I will complete the discussion now, derivation now. So please note now what I'm doing, so that actually you will be able to understand the whole thing of this discussion. Okay. So I want to bring in anyway the distance here, distance term here. Okay, but distance is a scalar, right? So I can't bring in. So I want to bring in distance. So in what way can I bring in distance is the question. What is this direction? what is this direction vector? What is this, like, how can I describe this direction? If this is W transpose X plus B equal to 0 line, what is this direction? Normal to this line is denoted by which vector?
W.
Yeah, very good. So this normal to this is described by a vector W, right? Because if it is normal, then only W transpose X plus B equal to 0 for all the points on the line, right? And hence this vector now, okay, this D vector, okay, distance is defined, but I can denote by this vector is in the direction W. So I denote D into W by norm W is the particular vector of this. Say here, whatever we have written before, delta X, right? So that delta X is what? If I want to write in terms of the direction and the magnitude, so the W by norm W is the unit vector along that direction. Do you agree or not? Delta X, if I consider it as vector, the unit vector along that delta X is W by norm W. Do you agree or not? And distance I am saying is D for the distance between X perp and say XK and the line. Fine? Is it clear or not? Is this clear what I have written now? X perp minus XK is denoted by this vector, and this vector is in the direction W with the distance D. So to write the vector, I write D as the magnitude of the vector multiplied by the unit vector W by norm W. Is it fine? Is it fine? I didn't hear from any.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right. So now consider this, and what we do now? Now we do the same thing which we have done before. Okay. So this is what is one that is missing. So X perp minus XK is equal to W by norm W. This is the direction because we need to equate vectors only. And this is the magnitude of interest to us. We just want to find what is W, what is D. Okay. So D is unknown quantity here. Remaining all we can probably consider. Now you pre-multiply both sides with W transpose. So here instead of writing X perp minus XK, I can also write XK minus X perp. So it, as I said, distance is a sign distance now. So it can be minus sign or positive sign. Okay, that probably it is not purely distance, it is the sign. Okay, so so to avoid that confusion, I can write XK minus X perp also. Okay. So now W transpose X perp minus XK into say plus B I will do. Similarly here W transpose W by norm W. Please see what I am doing, whether if it is clear or not. Okay. Plus B. Okay. So and hence what I have here, W transpose X perp plus B is 1. Fine. Minus W transpose XK is equal to, I hope this is clear. So what I am doing, what can I do now? What can I write here? Can I write like this? This is 0. Okay, and then D is equal to W transpose XK plus B by norm W. Okay, so it is sign distance. So I neglected the sign here. Okay, sign. So in fact, I got a minus sign here. But if you just take initially itself XK minus X perp, you will get a positive sign. Okay, XK minus X perp, if you take all through, you will get probably positive sign, I think. So this is how the distance is related to the distance from a perpendicular distance from a point to the line can be calculated. Yeah. So this completes the discussion now. So this is the whatever we have discussed here is the optimization function for support vector machine. Okay, SVM optimization function. But this is in support vector machine, as I said, there are several versions of it. Okay, there are several versions of it, and this is considering without say separable, non-separable samples. This is purely for only separable samples, assuming that there is no noise and the samples are not they are linearly separable. Samples are linearly separable. In such case, this cost function works. And there are several other discussions about support vector machine. So in fact, what support vector machine does is, it poses objective function in slightly say through little optimization framework into dual form and all. And finally, what you get is is in terms of inner product. The solution for this optimization function comes in terms of inner product, and that inner product can be translated to inner product over say features or nonlinear features, and there is a discussion that can be converted to kernel space and all. So I left the discussion where there are some few important other aspects of support vector machine, where it takes the things to higher dimensions and makes very good use of kernels and inner product of inner product within kernels and so on. So inner product in even multi-dimensional space, infinite dimensional space can be done through a kernel, etc. So those things all I skipped, but this is the basic idea of support vector machine.
Sir, kernels here are non-linear functions, right?
And no, it will come out actually. Now it doesn't come. So later what people say is, instead of starting from x of k, which are direct features, one can start directly from phi of x of k, where I want to take the already features into account. So for example, I don't want to give the decision boundary in linear decision boundary. Assume that my samples are like this. Okay, so if the samples are like this, if samples are like this, my decision boundary should be still like this. Okay, is it not? This is a non-linear decision boundary. Still, I also wish to have like maximum margin. This is known as margin. Okay, whatever we have derived finally, this is known as margin. In support vector machine terminology, this is margin. Okay, and the support vector machine is the optimization to get the maximum margin. It is also known as maximum margin classifier. So SVM is also known as maximum margin classifier.
Sir, is this method faster than neural networks, or?
Yeah, it's once you do whole optimization and all, the solution you get is reasonably faster. So one thing is testing is very, very fast. Because testing, what we will do is just you will compare only support vectors are involved in testing. So no other vectors are involved in testing. Only just I think these are the ones which will say, these are the ones which will finally decide the label, class label for test sample. So testing is way faster than any other method. So training takes reasonably some time, but I think testing is very faster. And as I said, this is non-linear support vector machine. So where people start in stuff, say they want to get non-linear decision boundary, right? So the decision boundary should not be like this, where linear things are there. So they start with a non-linear function now. This non-linear function of features will, if I start with, the whole things will, wherever xk is there, phi of xk will come. And finally, in the solution of the support vector machine, the update for w, etc. I will not write updates. W, etc. happens, I will write proportionally. There are several other things. Okay, if you people really wish, then I will probably send a our recorded video on this, or we can discuss with more details. I think for now I will skip at least. K of xk comma x m or something, x l will come here. So this this W is xk transpose XL. Some form of this will come. So there are several other terms. Okay, I all skipped all that summation. Whole things are there. So I'm skipping all that. Finally, you will get. There is a very. It's in fact known to be one of the very elegant classifier. There is a good mathematics. There is a good understanding needed, and finally there is a very good tricks people have applied. So it's one of the very well appreciated classifier and discussion. So on this, I will skip all those things. Finally, you will get in terms of inner product. If you consider phi of phi initially, finally what you get is phi of xk. Okay, transpose into, that is phi of xk is anyway vector again, phi of xl. Okay, and this is also inner product in nonlinear space. This is written usually in kernel. Okay, kernel xk comma xl, where you in fact no need to find what is phi, that is nonlinear transformation you want to get. Directly you can define kernel here, and this nonlinear transformation may even take, based on the definition of this kernel, to higher infinite dimensional space for getting the features. So you get somehow features in infinite dimensional space, and you do whatever operations there, only in very scalar operations you can do here, and you will get the final solution. That is its elegance. And it can take the noise into account, both nonlinear decision boundaries and the non-separable samples into account, and so on. Okay. So now I will stop the discussion here. So if you have any quick questions, we will address. Otherwise, we will probably, based on your interest, I can probably discuss one more class or one more video lecture on this. Otherwise, I will stop here. Yeah, I would like to hear from you. Is the discussion up to here is clear, up to the cost function?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So others?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So I will leave up to here. So you can listen to here. There is a small confusion in derivation of the distance, but I think now it is very clear. So because it's a small missing of tie to the distance. So how to map this delta x to distance was not clear in our previous discussion. So, and this is how, because the direction of W is same as this xk minus x per minus xk. So we based on it, we will get the distance. Okay, perpendicular distance. W transpose x plus b. This is signed. As I said, this can be positive or negative. So that's why we don't bother about sign now for now. Okay, right. And this is the cost function where we want to find closest samples only into account. With respect to closest samples, we would like to maximize W and B. And closest samples keep changing as we adjust W and B. And once the closest samples change, even W and B also keep changing. Okay. And this is a complex optimization. So, and in fact, there are several steps. In little bit of optimization is also required to bring primal to dual and all those things. Finally, you will get the solution of W. So in terms of say in inner product. So in fact, I think W in terms of inner product of two different samples, XK, XL are two different samples. One can be test sample, one can be training sample at some in testing. Finally, that is written in terms of inner product, and that inner product can also be extended from there to non-linear features or the decision boundary in non-linear space, a non-linear decision boundary, and that is usually gives inner product on non-linear features. And this phi, without knowing what is the non-linearity apply on the sample, I can directly find that good decision boundary. That means I can, as I said before, there are two classes of algorithms. One class of algorithms try to find directly the decision boundary. So this SVM comes to that class where without, by skipping some of the intermediate aspects, directly it plots the decision boundary through kernel. So which takes the features into very high dimensional non-linear space. So if you people are keen, let me know. So then I will discuss on the what is this kernel, how does it takes to non-linear space without taking explicitly knowing phi, how does it plot the decision boundary, all those things later. Fine. So otherwise we can stop for the course, for our regular MLIP course. Up to here we can stop probably. I think it's good enough for this MLIP course. Up to margin, what is margin and what is the cost function in support vector machine, what is the concept of support vector machine. That's all is good enough. We don't get into the nonlinear stuffs and kernels and all those things. Thank you then. So if you have any quick questions, please ask. Otherwise, we will leave now. Yeah. Thanks then. Thank you. Bye.